my topic is learning the code of virtues and values in modern day society. So I wanted to ask a few questions just to kind of get everyone waking up. And I mean, I'm pretty tired, so I could use this too. So raise your hand if you know anything about your ancestors. Keep your hand up if you know where your ancestors originated from. Raise your hand if you were taught any cultural or traditional practices related to your heritage growing up. Some more hands. Raise your hand if you had the opportunity to learn from an elder or have family members from any cultural, spiritual, or traditional practices learned. Okay. If this is something that you would like for your children and grandchildren to learn as well, keep your hand up. Finally, last question. How many of us in the room have already begun implementing these cultural practices into our daily lives? Okay. For me, this began when I was very young. I had many people in my life that surrounded my upbringing with traditional songs, dances, and our cultural and traditional values, virtues, and ethics. This was something that was practiced by the elders in my life, and so it was easy for me to keep this a part of my everyday practice. I think back and remember hearing conversations between some of my grandparents and their relatives and friends. They spoke Lakota. They laughed, shared stories, and talked about the good days when sometimes after a company would leave, my grandmother and grandfather would explain what their conversation was, and I used it as a teaching moment. As intriguing as it is for me, I hope you also find it important to continue to learn and embrace your traditional language, along with virtues and values. I believe that incorporating these ways back into our day-to-day life would also allow us to become more secure with our identity and restore our inner balance as Native people. I also believe that it is due to Western society, how they would adapt our Lakota practice, and there would be more peace and respect throughout the world because it is more than just repetitive motions. I view it as a way of life. I feel proud and humbled that I was able to be introduced to this lifestyle at a young age and come to realize that I will be able to share my knowledge with others throughout my lifetime. I found a passage in the book that I recently bought again, and I read it as I was younger. It says, "Amongst us, the old ones are the best models for how we should live our lives. Every old person is a collection of stories because of all that each one has seen and lived, and all that happens in the world around them in a lifetime." Our ancestors set the platform for our people to live our lives in a good way. They did this by honoring our Lakota virtues and values. And there's a total number of 12. The terms, they have their own meaning broken down into each word, but there's the list right there. And this is very important for the youth to learn at a young age, because I feel like it's getting a grasp of yourself and having touch with your roots. So I don't know if you guys see it or noticed, but there's posters throughout schools, like elementaries, where they have these virtues put in up along the walls. It's pretty cool. Our Lakota people lived this way for thousands of years, uninterrupted. However, in the past 2 years, there was a lot of disruption and forced change toward the way of our life, which affected the preservation and continuation of this lifestyle. Take a moment and imagine yourself living in time back then, when Native Americans were viewed as a threat to society. We were labeled, discriminated, oppressed, and legally banned from all of it new and known. During this time, Western society demonized our cultural practices, and Native people were viewed as uncivilized. Other than a power and control issue, I like to believe that this mainstream society argued that simply because they had no understanding of the ways, they felt the need to take it from them. However, I'm pretty certain that there was more of a power and control issue, and I find that scary. Sadly, this resorted to our people risking their lives to continue practicing religious ways with their ceremonies, traditions, and our language. And on the flip side, the people that continue to practice in secret in the middle of the night or way out and beyond from the homeland, they were able to be the keepers of our traditional ways. I believe that if these weren't the people that practice, we would no longer have our cultural identity. Can you imagine having to live in a life of secrecy, knowing that if you were caught, you would spend the rest of your life in jail or murdered, all because you were forcibly torn away? Only to be forced into culture that thought of you as a savage because of how you spoke, dressed, cooked, practiced religion, and so on and so forth. And I found this really powerful line that says, "My ancestors' land was once free and boundless as the great water. I still believe that the pain in Lakota still is stained on the hills of the West." It's by Lynn Megan and Tahoma High. That just was really powerful for me, and it hit emotionally. And then, as explained earlier, Lakota virtues were part of a lifestyle. The creation was intended to keep balance of the mind, spirit, and body. These virtues set a platform for being well-grounded, rounded, and mindful. They teach us to keep in mind not only our own personal well-being, but that we have that for others as well. It's my personal opinion that if today's society were to adapt, practice, and teach the virtues, there would be less chaos, less violence, less hunger and poverty, and more genuine, thoughtful, and productive people. In modern day society, it seems that the object of desire is plainly oneself. Society seems to be more motivated by self-serving pleasures and materialistic items, such than looking out for thy neighbor. This is the total opposite of what our Lakota virtues teach, and I can imagine a comparison of how unchaotic and peaceful life was back then compared to how it is in today's society. As of days back when you can recall yourself having the urge to get elders food or doing a simple task without being told. Like, imagine yourself a little kid, and what if you just got done dancing in the Tiny Tots category? And you're in line, they're getting ready to hand you money, and they accidentally hand you 2 bills. As a little kid, you would think, what should I do next? Should I give it back, or do I give it to the next kid? You take steps throughout your whole life growing up, and you have these values stuck deep into you that you don't even know. And in this current day, you notice that it's being brought back. It is giving people the chance to restore their spirit and hopefully step towards walking the right road. As you seem to find more information or notice how interesting things could be, it's leaving you feeling proud, and you come from indigenous roots, and also wanting to educate yourself and the future generations. I tend to hold humbleness and honesty close to me because those are what I held close growing up and what was based into my roots, especially from home and school. And it's just what I learned from experience since a little kid. Only a few virtues that I can talk dear about, but I hope you guys understand and choose to live by the rest, and also taking in this information. It'll make it seem like everything will fall into a structure of life, the way you want to live. And I hope you guys find this inspirational, and it gives you a little nudge to want to take some information and be willing to give it back. Thank you.